promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll. Kroller, how are you, buddy?
Great, Weave. I never realized how dark it is at 4 a.m.
That would be something, doing a show at 4 a.m. someday. But we have a great show planned, as always. We never want to disappoint. But before we get into this week's episode, let me just take a few moments to ask our very loyal listeners for a little favor. We've been getting lots of great feedback from many of you, and we're grateful for that. But since you seem to all be enjoying the show, our goal is to have other people enjoy the show. So I know a lot of you have Facebook out there. Some of you have hundreds, if not thousands, of friends on Facebook.
Thousands?
Thousands. Well, there's one out there that has 1,000,
Right.
I think. He paid for most of them. But the hope is that you would go into iTunes or Stitcher, and it's very easy. You just go down to the end of the episode, hit share the episode, and then if you do that, it'll pop up Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and it's very easy to share an episode on Facebook that way. You don't have to endorse everything we say. If you're entertained, very likely that other people will be entertained. And so we're trying to grow the show. We're trying to grow our audience. And we just ask if you're willing, if you would do that for us, we'd greatly appreciate it.
So we're already telemarketing our audience.
We're not asking for money yet. That'll
Not
come.
yet. That'll be next.
So on the show this week, we have our weekly Idiot of the Week award, and I have some nominees for Kroller here in a second. Then we're going to talk about our federal government and its current state. We won't be able to touch on everything, but we'll be able to blast away at them or praise them if Rich is so inclined. And then make sure everyone stays through the end of the show because, yes, you asked for it. We have another episode of the Kroller Wiki.
Very exciting. I look forward to that.
Pretty soon you're going to replace actual Wikipedia in popularity, I think.
That would screw up the entire world, but it's possible.
They take donations, by the way.
Yes, they do.
Okay, so Idiot of the Week. And as true to my nature, I'm a little on the serious side. I have one serious one and one not so serious one. It's not really even serious. It is idiotic. So I'll lay it out to you. So the first one is UCLA Diversity and Faculty Development White Paper on microaggressions. And
Say it again?
Microaggressions. Have you heard about this
No, this
term?
is new to me.
Okay, so if you have kids in college, you've heard about microaggressions like I have. Well, microaggressions, I'll define it for our audience, are the everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, insults, whether intentional or not, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to a target persons based solely on their marginalized group membership.
I'm lost already.
Oh, wait till you hear this. So basically, it's not a big offense; it's a micro offense, right?
Which is lower than a minor offense.
Yes, but here's the thing that caught my eye, and this has gone to the point of ridiculous. So the following statement, there's two of them here that I'm going to highlight. There's a bunch of them on here that are ridiculous, but these are what I thought were the most ridiculous and idiotic. This quote: "If you said this term, Rich, you'd be committing a microaggression." Quote, "I believe the most qualified person should get the job." That's a microaggression against someone. Here's another one. This is really treading on thin ice. America is the land of opportunity.
What?
Those two are examples from UCLA of a microaggression, and basically their rationale here is it's regarding the myth of the meritocracy. Statements which assert that race or gender does not play a role in life successes, for example, in issues like faculty demographics. So basically, they're saying that these statements are so general that they don't account for race. I thought that was the whole idea, is to not see race or it's just mind-boggling.
Let me tell you something. Then I'm a serial microaggressionist living in a 24/7 microaggressionist persona. You know what it is?
This is the crap our kids in
This
college
is
are being
the
taught.
politically correct left-wing nonsense. Listen, meet the Fockers. Everybody gets a 10-place medal. Pass or fail. No winners or losers. Don't keep score.
Safe spaces. Don't forget the safe spaces.
Just shoot me.
Okay. So nominee number 2, again, a little more funny, Kenny Bachman, who was partying with his buddies in Morgantown, West Virginia. This happened a little over a week ago, but we'll let it qualify. He's partying at West Virginia University. He's polluted, and he orders an Uber to take him back to the place where he was staying. Well, evidently he was so polluted that he inadvertently plugged in his hometown of Gloucester Township, New Jersey.
How far away is that?
I don't know the actual hours he was in the car, but he woke up 2.5 hours into the trip from his drunken slumber. And the Uber driver said, yeah, we're not even halfway there yet. He was in the middle of Pennsylvania, so he didn't want to get out. But anyhow, he went all the way home. $1,635 later, he owed the Uber driver. And Uber has confirmed that he actually inadvertently plugged in his home address instead of the address. So Kenny Bachman, drunk and stupid, $1,630 poorer today.
So, listen, the UCLA tree-hugging left-wing microaggressionists, that's more infuriating and stupid, and it's a group. I'm sure it's a wide group.
It's a big committee meeting.
Big committee. So, it's tough to pin Idiot of the Week on a group. So I'm going to go with Kenny Bachman because, listen, I've been pretty stewed, to the bejesus belt in my past, and I've never done anything quite as dumb as that cost me $1,600 and a 9-hour trip back home.
Kenny Bachman, you get the Idiot of the Week award.
And the $1 donation, don't forget.
$1 donation. You're going to pay that this week, right?
I'll pay it this week.
Because I'm $2 down from before. All right, so let's move on to our larger topic of the day, and it's our federal government. And this could go a lot of different ways, but here's where I'd like to preface. I like that word preface, Rich.
You love that word.
I like to preface, the federal government discussion with this. I think a lot of people are, I don't know if ignorant's the right word, or uneducated, or not well read, but they tend to think that the federal government is this, whether benevolence the right word, or this all-powerful central authority that we have no control over, and they make all the rules and they dictate to us. And really, and how much I know how much you don't let, I don't know how I can say.
Well, that's easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say. I know how much you hate my literalist views of the Constitution. But
yes, I do hate that.
I'll give you some more if I could get it out of my mouth.
Go ahead.
The original intent was that we, the people, through our legislative bodies and the states, granted enumerated powers to the federal government. And that's what I want people to realize is that's true today. If we wanted to change the federal government, we have the power through a constitutional convention. We could call a second one. All it requires is 2/3 of the state. We can change the federal government from it is. We have the power. I don't think people realize that, or
no, they don't
think it's too big of a job, and it may be too big of a job based on how much we've let the federal government grow. But I just wanted to put that out there because I don't think a lot of people think that way. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right. We as individuals don't think we can affect change on a grandiose scale as wide as the federal government. But listen, if you're going to get into what the problems are about our federal government and how it impacts society and everybody.
Yes, we are.
Let's not forget how we got there. I know you're a big historian. I'm a big statistical guy. And do you realize freedom isn't free?
I do.
Right? The U.S.
I always like that saying.
You love that saying. The U.S. was born in debt. And I love to tell the story about how we even got here. I don't know if the timing is right where you're going with this, but I can kick in with how we got here because federal deficit causes many other behaviors and sub-actions and subplots. And then, it just is a cascading vicious circle.
Are you going to give me some examples, or is that you want me to?
Well, you pick it up from here, and then I'll kick in.
All right. So what I wanted to just kind of briefly walk through is how we got to the current state of the federal government. So after 1789, the Constitution was written largely for about 130 years. Everything was similar in that It was limited central government. The states pretty much ran their own thing. There was a big priority on individualism and individual liberty trumping everything. And then it got to Trump. We'll get to that point. It got to the Teddy Roosevelt, Coolidge, Hoover era, early 1900s, and that's really where I think the progressive era got, where government started to grow, the federal government started to grow, and it's been a steady growth for the last almost 100 years, and there's been ebbs and flows for sure, but really the things that we take for granted nowadays really started in the early 1900s. So that's the Federal Reserve, the income tax. The income tax didn't exist before 1918, I think it was. Social Security, the New Deal under FDR. A lot of programs came in, federal programs came in then. Then under LBJ, the Great Society programs, War on Poverty, welfare reform, all this stuff happened. And yes, the Reagan era kind of pushed back a little bit on growth of the federal government, but really since then, it's just been a continued slog forward of growth of federal government, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and we have this massive duopoly that is largely the same. Obviously there's different issues, they spend on different things, but they both want to grow our federal government.
I'll take you back even further than saying this started in the early 1900s. Listen, somebody could say, well, that's fine, but what was the root cause that caused all these programs and spending in the 1900s? And I'll take you back. I'm going to take you back. The original Fed was the Continental Congress. And guess what? That was coming out of the Revolutionary War, the independence of the United States from Great Britain. And guess what? I said that twice. We lacked the power to tax at that time. So right out of the gate.
It was all the revenue was from tariffs back then, which are in the news today.
Right out of the gate, we owed like $12 million to Dutch bankers and the French government. And we were in a hole out of the get-go. In fact, the first analysis of this from 1790, that's 1790, put the newborn U.S. at a 30% debt to GDP ratio. So right out of the gate. Now, you fast forward, right? I know when Alexander Hamilton focused on the debt after that.
Good Broadway show, by the way.
I've never seen it. I'm not a Broadway fan. We'll talk about that in another show. But Alexander Hamilton then focused on the debt, picking up the slack from Alexander Hamilton, and he got the debt ratio down to 10%. But how did he do it? Through taxation. So the irony is what we revolted against, taxation without representation, exorbitant taxation from Great Britain. We had no taxes, and then we actually had to go back to taxes. So it all starts there, and I understand we're now close to a 200% debt to GDP ratio. So you might have some answers about that.
Well, I think we talked a little bit about that last show with the immediate gratification nation and how much in debt we are. So we won't focus as much on that today. Suffice it to say, they've been profligate. They don't manage their money well, and they put us all in debt, and that's going to jeopardize us in the future. And it seems like it's been going on forever. It's just worse now. What I'd like to focus on is the fact that our elected members largely are out for themselves. If you think about the time that they spend about 50% of their time now in Congress raising money, and they're only concerned about being reelected for the most part. Obviously, I'm generalizing. There's a few good people out there, but largely as a body, they want to get reelected. They don't care about the long term. They spend money to try to bring home bacon to their constituents, and it's not conducive for a long-term thriving of our country. And I would even argue this, that the three of the biggest problems that we have in our society, education, healthcare, and finances, retirement, were all made worse by the government trying to help. Government programs engaging and involving themselves in a free market where it could best be done with a free market. So government does very few things well. Maybe the military you could make a good example of, but largely they're inefficient, they're ineffective, and they've gone too big.
Are you referring to a polar dichotomy? Where in one hand you're trying to help, but the actual attempt to help creates the problem. Now, is it a true, sincere, intentional try to help, or is it a superficial attempt to help?
I think true. The intentions are all usually pretty good. I mean, I think most people have good intentions. There's some evil people out there, but most of them are good intentions. The problem is unintended consequences. They don't understand unintended consequences of government interdiction into free markets. So education, the K through 12, most people in this country agree that the K through 12 education system is not ideal. There's some districts that produce great results and great kids, and there's other ones that are failing miserably all over the country. There's lots of issues with regard to health care. The government interjected themselves into reimbursement for health care in between the insurance companies and the hospitals. We could do a whole episode on that. Retirement, the Social Security trust fund, if it is a trust fund, it's a pay-go system. It's not really a trust fund. It's bankrupt. So, there's lots of problems, and I would argue that the federal government, is woefully inept at doing most things.
Well, you raise a good point about the short-term effect, right? So we elect a president for 4 years, maybe 8 years, and that's it, right? Tough toenails, you're out of here, even if you were doing great things. Why is that? If somebody was doing great things, I'd like to keep them in for 12 years, 16 years. Who the heck cares? There's a lot of examples through the years.
Well, they're all concerned with their legacy, and they're not worried about the long term either. They're caring about themselves. So,
You're exactly right. But there's so many examples, from Reaganomics to what George W. did, or George Sr., to what Clinton did. And at certain times, for a short period, there was a boon to the economy or a reduction in debt. But the irony is what it took to get there, to your point, actually caused a longer-term problem.
Right. So it's well known now that the policies of George W. Bush and Clinton contributed to the housing crisis collapse. And it took a decade of bad policy to manifest itself in a housing collapse. And there was other greed associated with that, but it was largely driven by government policy that wanted more people to have a house. And so we can go down that rat hole if you want as well. But my main point here is that the Democrats and Republicans, who are the two main dominant parties, and like you said, you can elect them for 4 years or 8 years. There's definitely differences, and they may be substantial to some people, but largely the government has continued to grow. It's grown and has administered programs inefficiently. And my point is that if Congress has a 16% approval rating, most presidents don't even have a 50% approval rating. My point is, if we're not doing well, why not try something different? If the Democrats and Republicans have had their chance for the last 100 years, why can't we have an alternative?
Mark, can I call you Mark?
Yes.
I have been thinking the same exact thing. So I talk about common sense. And here's where
you're Thomas Paine and me again?
Yes, and I know we're going to bring up economics, which you love, which it's another...
I'll bore the audience again.
Bore the audience to death. But, here's the deal. It apparently isn't working, right? And it's become more polarized. So there used to be a time where Democrats and Republicans would sit in the same House and Senate and work together for a common good for all the people. They'd put aside personal gain, personal agendas, but we've become so polarized that
it's tribal almost.
It's tribal, if you will.
Yeah.
That there's a right wing and a left wing, and there's a far right and a left right. You know what it reminds me of? So I knew a friend that was a big Bruce Springsteen fan. Now, granted, Bruce has a lot of great songs, but Bruce also has a terrible voice, and he has a lot of crappy songs. But this guy
Bob Dylan, too.
Bob Dylan's another example. But when you get a true loyalist, a right-wing or left-wing loyalist, They say every song's great. Every Bruce Springsteen song's great. Every Bob Dylan song's great, even if the songs stink because they're a fan of that particular person. That's what's happened now with Republicans and Democrats. No matter what a Republican or Democrat says, if you're a part of that party, you defend it, you promote it, even if it's blatantly wrong.
And you can't even admit any weakness. A lot of our friends we talk to, they think Trump they won't say anything negative about him, which almost anyone who's fair-minded would say he's an idiot on a lot of things. And by the way, Hillary would have been an idiot on a bunch of things. But be fair about it, be objective. Very few people are like that because they're so tribal. And I think it has to do with our culture where we want to have a team to vote for. And it's A versus B. And I think the mainstream media also likes this, to have a team. It produces ratings by having a rooting interest in one team versus another. And to convolute it with a third team would mess up the order.
Well, but maybe it's finally time for a great third party as a check and balance to keep these parties in line and honest. And really what the intention was from the original Constitution, to do what's right for the people, by the people, for the people. So there's been some small attempts through the years to introduce and integrate a third party, but it never seems to gain steam.
Yes, I agree. And part of the problem is, and I hear this from a lot of friends on both sides, well, it could be worse. I hate that it's a logical fallacy to say, well, it could be worse. Yeah, well, I guess Hitler could have killed 4 different, ethnic groups instead of just the Jews. I mean, it's a ridiculous argument that it could be worse. Does that mean we don't try to get better because it could always be worse? That's stupid. If the federal government is not working, and I think a lot of people agree that it's not working, why not try a different system or a different party or a different, kick out the people that are the incumbents? That's my point.
So maybe a third party like the Church of Scientology. Why can't we get Tom Cruise and John Travolta to lead this nation?
L. Ron Hubbard for president? Is that what you're advocating?
So I am making fun at something, but I know where this is going, Mr. Literalist, libertarian, Constitution lover. I love the Constitution too, but I think you have a solution potentially for how to fix this.
Forget libertarianism for now, because my point is that if the Republicans and the Democrats were doing a good job overall, okay, they deserve it. If they're doing a good job, and it's a hard job, by the way, but they're not. They haven't been, neither party. So if they're not doing a good job, let's try something else. Is that a kooky idea that like a lot of libertarians get branded as?
Not only is it not kooky, is that K-O-O-K-Y, kooky? So let me ask you this. Are there other examples in history or even in modern day politics and governments and countries where a third party or multiple parties beyond a two-party system have been effective?
Well, there's lots of parties in other nations. The problem is that we have a very unique form of government. We happen to have the best system, I believe. I think the United States has the best system of government in the world. It's far, far, far from perfect. But yes, there's all kinds of different countries that have different political parties, and they work fine. In this country, that hasn't been seen in any, Ross Perot ran as an independent back in the Clinton-Bush election, and that siphoned off a bunch of Republicans, and Bush blamed it on him or whatever. I think I have my presidents right. But other than that, there really hasn't been any substantive third party. And that's the other problem, is a lot of Republicans and or frustrated Democrats say, well, those people are irrelevant, so I don't want to waste my vote. And my point is, it'll never be credible third party until several people say, those people don't get another shot. It doesn't matter if I'm, quote, wasting my vote. We got to build up critical mass to have a credible third option.
So the Libertarians had a shot, I believe, to make a statement, make some noise this past election, because we arguably had the worst presidential election candidates in the history of the United States.
Hear, hear.
No offense to Trump and Hillary, but listen, Trump had some great ideas and make America great, and maybe the government should be run like a business and keep out illegal immigrants that are, either pushing drugs or illegal guns. Hey, I was all for that, but he's a bit of a nut. And then we had Hillary, who I don't think many people could trust, and was a liar and causing all sorts of other problems. And
but you're right. The polls indicated they were both highly unpopular.
highly unpopular, not real likable people. Now, you got your Trump lovers and your Hillary lovers, that's fine. But all in all, I think it was the two worst candidates both parties ever put forward collectively in our history.
Yep.
Right? Now, there's been some other terrible candidates, but at least maybe the opposing party had a good candidate, so it was an easy landslide victory. In this case, the Libertarians had an opportunity, and I think they blew it.
Yeah, they blew it.
With your boy.
Well, he wasn't my boy.
I know, but remember, he couldn't even name 3 countries out in South America. He wasn't prepared. He wasn't literate.
He was a stoner.
He was a stoner. He just...
Yeah, he screwed it up. I don't think even if we had the best possible Libertarian candidate, he would have won, because the established interest of the Republicans and Democrats still would have won. But he would have given a lot more credibility, and he basically blew it. I would still argue he'd be a better president than Trump, but I know I'm in the extreme minority on that.
And that his name?
Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
So
he was. Yeah.
How do we put a third party, a legitimate third party? Because I do think there is a lot of good to the libertarian message, honoring the Constitution, more power to the people, but
socially liberal, fiscally conservative, free markets, peace.
How do you
non-aggression principle?
How do you evangelize it and educate the public to take more notice?
Well, it's a tremendous uphill battle. The established interests are very powerful. And what we really need is people to look at the data and look at what the results of the Republicans and Democrats have done over the last 80 or 100 years, say to themselves, hey, this is not working. They had their shot. Let's vote for the next 3 presidential elections. Let's vote for a third party and build some credibility. And then maybe 4 elections from now, it'll be a credible person. But you gotta walk before you run, and we got to build a credible option by people deciding for themselves they're not going to vote Republican and Democrat anymore.
Can I write you in? Can I vote for you?
Again, let's summarize and move on.
I'm going to summarize this. Listen, we still have the greatest country and nation in the world.
Amen.
The United States is unbelievable. I'm proud to be an American. Thank God I was born in the United States. We have our problems, but even with our problems, we're still the best.
The system was ingenious.
Yeah. From our founders. Hey, God bless Switzerland, New Zealand, and Australia, and London. I love all those places, but we still have it the best here.
And our system was created out of nothing. It didn't exist anywhere else. They created a brand new form of representative government with limited central government power. That never existed prior to our...
Hence, the term genius is associated with that. But here's one of my fears, right? Because every great dynasty has always imploded, whether it took 50 years or 1,000 years. Right? You got the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, etc. I think the U.S. is too big and powerful to implode, and too integrated and essential to the well-rounded running of the entire globe. But you look at Japan. Japan had a very similar situation in the 90s with its own real estate bubble, and the banking failure, and its debt to GDP ratio was insane.
Right.
And they're still reeling 25 years later. I just hope we don't get to that.
Well, let's hope not. And so my summary is this. People out there, if you're fed up and you agree that Congress largely has abdicated its duty and they're not doing their job, well, let's vote in other people. Let's look outside the establishment duopoly and try an alternative. Why not? What do we got to lose? All right, so we got to move on to the Coroller Wiki. And the first one, we got to move through these a little bit quicker this week. The first one, Coroller, is turn a blind eye.
So what's interesting about this, because as you know, I'm a sports aficionado, and there was a guy, a baseball player, I believe his name was One Eye Sal. I think he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And he was kind of a utility infielder, but with some promise. He unfortunately...
was a switch hitter, wasn't he?
He was a switch hitter.
Okay, yeah, I remember.
It has to be what I'm about to tell you. So he unfortunately was struck by a pitch in the face and lost sight in his right eye. Now, pretty long comeback attempt, a lot of rehab and visual acuity exercises.
He spent some time at Will's Eye Hospital, I remember, right?
Yes, he did. Great spot, by the way. And in his attempted comeback... Right, and he was a very aggressive player, still not afraid. His manager and hitting coach had to constantly remind him, hey, listen, if a pitch comes in high, you have to turn a blind eye. Otherwise, you're going to lose sight in both eyes.
That would be awful. But no, that's not what happened. The British naval hero Horatio Nelson was blind in one eye. During a battle, his fellow British forces were signaling him to stop attacking the Danish. But he held up his telescope to his blind eye, saying, "I don't see the signal," so he could continue to attack. So therefore, he turned a blind eye.
That's a great story.
All right, next one. Let the cat out of the bag. This could cat lovers out there, turn off your podcast right now.
Well, this one's a little concerning. And if I don't know if anyone knows this particular story, but back in the early 1900s in San Francisco, Chinatown, where a lot of folks...
Oh, no. I think I know where this is going.
It's the truth. A lot of people from the Far East came over to
You can't hide from the truth. We cannot hide from the truth on this show.
No, and sometimes you can't handle the truth. So there were many cats that were a popular pet in China that were brought over to the United States. But unfortunately, there was a ton of these cats, and they were all over the place. Stray cats, alley cats. So Chinese restaurants started using them as meat, unbeknownst to their trusting patrons. Now, one patron on his way to the restaurant noticed that there was a ton of cats in the back of the restaurant, and that seemed unusual to him. So he went to investigate it. He peeked in the back door, and lo and behold, there was a chef about to open a bag with a purring, screeching animal. And in his disgust, he shouted to the cook, "Hey, let that cat out of the bag."
That's good. I actually prefer that to the original.
That's not true?
It's close. This has its roots in 18th century street fraud. Suckling pigs. When's the last time you heard that term? Suckling pigs were often sold in bags, and a popular scheme was to replace the pig with a cat and sell it to an unwitting victim.
A suckling pig. I just want to make sure we understand that.
I think that would be a young pig, but I wouldn't use the term suckling. But anyhow, last one, eating crow. What is that? Where did that originate?
Well, this is actually a more sensitive topic. So for people that know or don't know, there were the Jim Crow laws that started in the late 1800s and actually ran into the 1960s that forced racial segregation. This obviously, to this day, still has caused a lot of human strife, and civil war came out of this, right? Or initially. So, however, as we became a more humane society and segregation was slowly turned around, people of color could actually rightfully say to these people, "Hey, you racists, go shove it. Take that, you SOBs," or in essence, eat crow.
Eat crow. Yeah, I mean, I think you're a little off the mark there. The way I have referenced this is the Bible lists crows, buzzards, and rats, and I would agree, as unfit for eating. I've never eaten any of them. And it was actually illegal in the Middle Ages to eat crows. As such, it became quite humiliating to consume them. So eating crow is a humiliation.
Wow.
And that's where it originated.
You learn something new every day. Do I get credit for any of those?
Wow. The middle one, I think you get credit for that, partial credit. But I have a feeling that you're never going to get 3 out of 3 because I just won't allow it.
I disagree.
All right, so as we conclude this episode, Crawler, any thoughts on our federal government or any of our little other mini segments, Idiot of the Week or Crawler Wiki?
Hey, look, I agree with you that the comment, "Hey, it could be worse." You know what? A lot of things could be worse, but there's no reason why we can't try to fix them.
All right, so I'd like to remind our listeners that we do want to hear from you. You can follow us on Twitter. We talked about sharing on Facebook. That's great. We want to know how we can improve. Join us next week, and it's a little bit of a dicey subject, but this is what we do on this show. We talk about difficult issues. We're going to talk about obesity in America. It's a problem, folks. We got to talk about it if we're going to try to solve it or address it or get better at it. It'll probably lead into some nutrition and some of the things that affect our decision making, and I suspect that'll be a little bit of a delicate subject, but we're not afraid of those. And like many of our topics, we're gonna address it with some humor, but also with some straight talk. So be ready for it. And finally, as we say each week, remember that if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.